Adam Lacey, co-founder of Assemble You. If you could start by introducing yourself, please, to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Adam. I co-founded a company called Assemble You 3 years ago with my cousin Rich. We focus on audio learning. So we create short, succinct podcasts that anyone can listen to on the go. And I've been in the online learning space for the last 13 years, designing, creating, and selling various types of digital learning, both direct to consumer and now, which I do a lot more of, into businesses, so kind of like corporate learning and development.
And you mentioned you founded that with your cousin. I always hear people say, don't go into business with family, so it seems to be working for you.
Yeah. We get on really well. We always have done, and we actually talked for quite a few years before we started Assemble You about starting a business, and we're both quite entrepreneurial, had lots of ideas, and then the stars aligned in terms of it being an appropriate time for us both to do something, and we decided to go for it, and we haven't looked back.
Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yes, so probably not at university. I think at uni, I applied to lots of different graduate jobs after uni. I think like a lot of students or a lot of graduates do, because I wasn't really sure. I took a humanities degree in European politics, which is pretty comical to have a degree in that now as a Brit. But yeah, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. Applied to lots of different kind of corporate roles, and then I actually ended up at a company called Streetcar, and Streetcar was a car club business, car hire by the hour. They're now called Zipcar. They got bought by Zipcar when I was there, and they're all over places like London, all over America. And it was a very fast growing company, and I got onto their graduate scheme, and it was called the Entrepreneurial Development Program. They gave it this really kind of lofty title, but it was, I guess, kind of very much a kind of a taster of what startup life would be like, or what life is like in a fast growing company. And ever since then, I never really wanted to go and work for any big corporations, or get stuck in a kind of 10, 20, 30,000 person company. I always sort of after that sought out much smaller businesses, and that was my kind of that was my bag after that initial experience.
And what was that graduate scheme like? Because I imagine sounds different to most graduate schemes where you just do a couple of rotations and learn a specific skill set.
Yeah, I mean, we did do some rotations in there, and people had different jobs, but it was a lot more reactive to the needs of the business, so that the graduates tended to go to the areas of the business that really kind of needed them. So I guess the big benefit of it was that you were thrown into quite kind of senior or serious-ish roles quite early on, which was great, because it was a bit of a sink or swim environment, to be honest with you. And a lot of the time we were kind of making things up as we went, because there weren't processes, or there weren't kind of ways of doing things, and so you were kind of discovering them and working them out with your manager, and kind of muddling through. So it was a really, really interesting place to start my career, and a great place to kind of learn a lot in a very short amount of time. So yeah, I will be forever grateful for that, because it was a real great introduction to the world of work and business.
Yeah, it sounds like a good approach of giving young people responsibility straight away. And I think that's the problem with a lot of big companies, is that they don't. Because you see like all these companies coming out of Y Combinator run by like 22-year-olds taking on the world. I think OpenAI's average age is 23. So yeah, it seems good to see that. And then from there, you went on to Yes, that's it. Yeah. And tell me about that.
So that was I think I was employee number like 4 or 5 there. So again, very small company. And that was my first job in the world of online or digital learning. At the time, Excel Business sold a kind of a set of Microsoft training courses. So Microsoft Excel training courses, but then also things like PowerPoint, Word. And it was interestingly, it was predominantly a direct to consumer business. And for a couple of years, that business rode what I call the Groupon wave, the daily deal wave. So we were selling courses across about 32 different countries at one point. We translated the courses into lots of different languages, and as Groupon grew, we actually sort of grew with it. As they opened in Latin America, we translated courses into Spanish and kind of ran deals out there. And it was a very, very effective and low cost route to market, because it was all kind of commission based. You sell a course for 20 quid and they keep a tenner of it, you get a tenner of it, that kind of model. And so we were very, very quickly able to scale that with a small team, and then start to build out both a direct to consumer training business, but then also a B2B training business. So we pivoted, and that company eventually became an EdTech company called Filtered. And so I was there for 7 years. I was a director, and again, that was probably even more of a learning curve than Streetcar was, in terms of having to work things out as we went, because there were even fewer processes in place. And we kind of the whole thing of daily deals, or these kind of very high volume marketing sites were pretty new. And you heard these horror stories of like Groupon selling 10,000 cupcake vouchers, and then the cupcake shop had to like basically going out of business because everybody wanted their cakes and no one could deliver them. So there were all these kind of I guess challenges that we were trying to overcome. Fortunately, we had a digital product, so it was obviously a lot easier to scale than some of the physical things that were being sold at the time. But that was fascinating. And then off that, we got into kind of direct to consumer marketing, building email lists, building out a kind of a suite of training that we were selling direct, and then we pivoted that suite of training to be kind of more appropriate for businesses, and started selling it into organizations as well.
You said about the Groupon, like having issues, for example, with the cake companies, that sort of thing. What was the biggest difficulty you had at that business? Was there any times in specific you can think of?
Yeah, loads of different things. It was normally some kind of, if there was any kind of tech issue, as in, if, I don't know, if the website went down momentarily, or if someone, if there was it all relied on voucher codes, coupon codes. Groupon sent you out a coupon, you use that coupon online. And so it took us 6 months, 8 months or so to really refine and improve that process. Because if there was any ambiguity or difficulty when people came to actually claim the product that they bought, if you'd sold 20,000 of them in a week, which we had in some cases, then the problem was kind of amplified and caused enormous customer service issues, basically. Loads and loads of people getting in touch going, my code doesn't work, or I can't log on, or all this kind of stuff. So those are the main learnings, actually. It's just like, how do you design something or build something with the end user firmly in mind, and how do you make it incredibly simple for them to get access to the thing that they've bought, and reduce as many barriers as possible. And this is back in like 2012, 2013. There weren't the kind of very kind of easy to build websites with great UIs and all this kind of stuff around. So a lot of this was being done by kind of developers that we had working for us, and they were kind of making it up as they went along as well.
How did you manage to stay on Groupon for so long that other companies weren't doing it? Like, how did other companies not see, this is a great opportunity, and come and compete with you? Or did they?
They did, and that's what killed it in the end. Yeah. And Groupon, to be honest with you, made the mistake of, they did a few things wrong. One of the big ones was when they saw a category was going well, they sent their sales team out to go and find lots of other deals that could kind of be in that category. So you went from being a provider of online learning against 2 or 3 other online learning companies that were in there, to being a provider of online learning against 50. And of course, then your sales just tanked. And then all of a sudden the appeal for us as a company of Groupon, which is, yes, you have to give these enormous discounts, but you get enormous volumes, so there's that kind of trade-off you're doing. That basically disappeared then after that. So it was a tough battle. I mean, we managed to stay on there long enough, predominantly because we were bringing out new products, refreshing products. The products that we had were actually really, really good at the time as well. So in terms of them being pretty kind of market leading from an online learning point of view, they were very good. So all those things contributed. And then just relationship building. So that was the other thing. We took the time and effort to go and meet Groupon account managers. So I was in in Chicago going to see them in their US office. I flew down to South Africa to see them in their Cape Town office and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we just put quite a lot of time and effort into building relationships, which, you know, I think you can't underestimate the importance of in business, especially if you've got someone looking at, you know, 20 different Microsoft Office providers, which they might have had by that time, or 30 different ones, and they're like, okay, which one are we going to run a deal with this week? You know, the one that they kind of have seen good results for before, and the people that they know and like working with, or kind of a new unknown. So we leveraged our early mover advantage to deepen relationships and keep those marketing channels alive for as long as we could.
And how were you able to keep a great product?
Well, I guess that comes from like a passion of the actual product. So the original product was a Microsoft Excel course, and it was designed by the founders, and they really kind of were passionate about Excel and passionate about teaching it in a useful and kind of business practical way, and that really shone through in the product. And then we expanded into other areas, and we would find other great authors to come and come and kind of create courses with us. And we operated a royalty-based system. So they were not just incentivized at the beginning by being paid a bit of money to do something, but they were kind of incentivized on an ongoing basis to make sure they were delivering a really great piece of training. So that was the kind of, the model, finding great people. And we typically look for people who have published books on the kind of topic areas that we were looking at, because there weren't a lot of online courses. You know, Udemy was in its infancy back then. In fact, Udemy got a lot of its first users from Groupon. That was back in kind of 2012. That was one of the big kind of competitors that Excel for Business had on Groupon was kind of different Udemy courses. So yeah, it was, but there weren't that many people doing online courses back then. So yeah, that's typically where we went to look and find potential authors.
What was it that sparked you to start your business?
So Assemble You, well, I've been in the learning space a while. I was continually kind of impressed with content. I like digital content as a kind of commercial model. I think there's something you can build once digitally and sell 100 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 times is great business in my opinion, especially if you can sell it on a subscription basis, on a SaaS pricing model. So there's a commercial side of it, which is obviously, you know, quite attractive if you can get that to work. But the other thing was really just like a gap in the market. Like I like the industry, I like education, like teaching, like kind of being someone who produces good quality learning, and at the same time, I felt like there wasn't really a product out there that reflected how I was learning at the time. And my cousin, by the way, my co-founder, was exactly the same, and we had these conversations quite regularly. But we were listening to podcasts and audiobooks for our education, because we've got young families. We could stick them on in the car. We could, the rare occasion we get to the gym, we could put one on and listen to something, and that was a lot easier for us than doing online video courses or reading books or things like that, because we just didn't have the time a lot of the time between the various things we had going on. So we kind of looked at the corporate learning landscape and was like, okay, well, who's delivering really good quality digital learning? And there were lots of them out there. And then we looked at how they were doing it, and it was pretty much all video, or it was, e-learning, which we're not a big fan of in terms of like, the kind of static screens, lots of text, reveals, all that kind of stuff. I kind of lose concentration quite quickly on that kind of thing. And we're like, well, why is no one, instead of doing a video, just doing audio, just creating great stories, great podcasts that people can listen to that have a very specific learning outcome and are designed with learning principles in mind. And there wasn't really anyone out there. There were people doing book summaries. So, you got Blinkist and you've got Get Abstract, and they do really great book summaries, and they're a good product, but they're just a summary of a book. They're not, a piece of like learning designed. And every time we listened to one of them, I just basically wanted to go and read the book. So I was like, oh, there's really interesting points there. I'd like to find out more. And so, yeah, we felt there was a space in the market for it. Because we had a number of good connections in the industry, we started kind of soft testing the idea on people, and we got some positive noises back. And so we thought, you know what, let's go for it. And we put some of our own money in and decided to create a product. And 3 years ago, pretty much almost to this week, we launched our first 30 short audio lessons. They're all about 10 minutes long. They're kind of structured, designed for the efficient transfer of knowledge, designed to get people thinking about the topics and kind of engaging and taking that back to their jobs and thinking about how they could then implement the stuff that they'd heard. And we then started selling it, and we're still here 3 years later. So it's we've survived the first hurdle, which is that kind of initial year or two.
How did you go about getting your first customers? You said you touched on you having contacts in the industry, test it out. How did you get them to actually pay for your product?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and probably the hardest thing to do as a business owner is get your first customers. So there were two routes for us really. Partners and resellers was our first route. There are a lot of learning systems. There are a lot of other content platforms in the corporate learning industry, and we started off by going to them and said, we've got a new product. It's different. What do you think? And we very quickly got a positive response from them. So we were pushing on a bit of an open door because they were getting a lot of e-learning, a lot of video content, and we said, we've got this new thing. It's podcast-based learning, and pretty much everyone we spoke to or approached about it wanted to test it out at least. So we started working with partners, and there's multiple different kind of financial commercial models for those partners, but effectively they are reselling our content in one way or another, and they're paying us for that. So that was our first, I guess, revenue in for the business. We then, in terms of like selling the actual library, we then just hustled. We just did a lot of outreach. So we started contacting people on LinkedIn who we thought our ICP was. We did a few years ago kind of mass emailing tools we were using. Those had some success. I feel like they get very little success with them now, but a few years ago they kind of worked. And our first customers generally came from that. And then we started going to industry events as well. So, and we felt that legitimized us quite a bit. It was a big risk because, we didn't really have thousands to spend on an exhibition stand, but we kind of took the cheapest stands that we could get, and we, bought a pop-up kind of build that lived in my garage, and, drove down there and set it all up ourselves. So we did it as cost efficiently as possible. And those events were very good for us. So again, in a room full of learning technology and video and e-learning providers, we stood out as having something a bit different. And so that really helped. And that kind of gave us a pipeline of leads to go after. Both myself and my co-founder as well have both had predominantly commercial roles. So in terms of like running a pipeline, sales, all that kind of stuff, we had quite a bit of experience in it. We weren't the kind of, I guess, the tech founders that create an amazing product, but they've got no idea how to market it or sell it. We I guess had more of the marketing and sales expertise and a kind of decent amount of product expertise as well. So that was also useful. Our past experience was pretty helpful there as well.
And how did you go about creating your first product? Because I imagine nowadays people can create products easily, MVPs within days, but a few years ago it would have been harder. So how did you do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, keep in mind that our product is not a tech product. We're a publisher effectively. So we create learning, and then that learning can be housed on all sorts of different technology, and we only use existing tech to kind of house our learning as such. So the effort that we put in was on the kind of the research that went into the product, I guess the kind of the learning design, the structure, and all that kind of stuff. And then we wrote all of the first lessons ourselves, and then we tested them out on lots of different people. That was the kind of way the way that we approached it. And we've been honing and iterating and adding products and adding different kind of libraries ever since, basically on the same principle. So we come up with an idea, a product, put together an example, start showing that to people, start getting feedback, start working on, right, what did they like, what didn't they like, how do we position this, and then from there have built out have built out a few different libraries of learning now.
And with audio learning, do you have to do any convincing of people, or are people open to audio learning, or a lot of people prefer audio learning? Or
yeah, it's really interesting. There's there's a few different camps. You get and you kind of see this at a trade show. You get people that come up to you and go, sorry, excuse me. You get people that come up to you and go, "Oh my God, podcasts! I love podcasts," and you know that that's going to be an easy conversation because they understand the benefit and they're already kind of bought into the modality. And then you have the opposite. You're just like, I don't understand why is it just a podcast? Why is it in a video? You know, and so you get both sides of the coin really. I think the thing we focused on initially was, you know, one of the big issues typically in corporate learning and development is engagement. So it's people buying big libraries of learning and then them never kind of using them, or them sitting there on a computer. And what we were trying to do, or how we positioned it, was actually, well, maybe part of the issue is that, and there's normally a multitude of issues why people aren't using learning that's been purchased for them, but one of the obvious ones is kind of time. And so people just don't have the time to do it. So we give people a product that they can listen to while they are traveling, while they're commuting, while they are taking a walk, while they're taking a break from their screen, you know, basically while they're cooking, or, you know, whatever. So a product that can be used almost in dead time. And that's worked reasonably well in terms of getting people to see, oh, okay, so yeah, that works for that reason. Another thing I would say is that our product generally sits alongside other learning products and learning interventions. Rarely are we a kind of sole solution. So we might sit alongside a LinkedIn learning library, or we might sit alongside kind of a in-person program of learning, and we'll probably form part of that program of learning. You know, they might have some career coaching, they might have some group sessions, and they might go away and listen to some of our podcasts, and then they might come back and they might discuss those in like a book club format. So often we are weaved into and part of a kind of a larger or wider learning intervention. We've had to make sure that we price ourselves appropriately for that as well, because, you know, big learning libraries are very expensive. We've come in and we've deliberately priced ourselves very, very competitively so that we sit as a nice addition to an existing learning ecosystem, rather than being a kind of a separate thing. I think that's actually been one of the biggest challenges that we've found, is like, how do you get your pricing right? How do you make sure that you're providing great value to people and to businesses buying from you, but also you're not leaving money on the table because you're kind of underselling yourself, or you end up spending the same amount of money on just customer success and account management that you actually bring in from a client because you've given them a great deal. You know, so there's all those kind of things that we're juggling as well.
And how do you do that, getting the pricing right, or as close to right as possible? Is it just a case of testing, or do you do research, or?
Yeah, all of the above, really. Research is kind of a mix of art and science, I guess, a little bit. And then finding creative ways. So as the library has grown and grown, we've not put the prices up much. So basically the library is getting increasingly better value. But at the same time, in the last 18 months, a lot of organizational budgets have been cut or squeezed. And so we're having to get creative with organizations in terms of how we get our content into their business. And so that might mean, okay, well, we normally sell the whole library, but or one of the whole libraries, but we might just say now, all right, well, let's maybe start you off with the leadership content and just buy that first, and then from there we can kind of build you into a larger library purchase once you can show that you're using it and the value is kind of apparent to the organization. We can make a case for more budget there.
And what's been the most challenging thing running your own business, if there is one single thing?
Yeah, it's the uncertainty of, you know, what's coming down the road, and a lot of that is commercial uncertainty. So I think the big thing that keeps me awake, and I think most other business owners, is you kind of make a commitment to the people working for you that you're gonna, you know, keep them employed, give them a great career opportunity, and all the rest of it, and then it's really your responsibility to make sure there's enough money coming in to enable that to happen. So yeah, that's been the big driver, is that constant kind of back of your mind, you know, will we keep growing, that sort of thing, and can we keep keep everything going forward? And fortunately, we have kept growing. So we've grown a lot over the last 3 years, and that's been great. But it's certainly some months, some days, you certainly feel like, oh my god, everything's going bad, and it normally happens all at once. Do you know what I mean? You'll have someone say, oh no, we can't go ahead with that deal, and then someone who's meant to renew will cancel their renewal, and then somebody else will cancel a call, and you're like, oh god, it's all falling apart. And then the next week, 3 things go absolutely brilliantly, and you just feel great about the business. I think that's the kind of the roller coaster of owning a business. Is you feel every up and down, maybe a little bit more than when you're just an employee.
Yeah, everything always comes at once. It's always up and downs. It's never like constant. Yeah, I think that's such the mental challenge for entrepreneurs, is to be able to withhold the roller coaster of emotions and events. And you touched on you've grown well in the last 3 years. What are your future plans for growth?
So two and a bit years ago, nearly 2.5 years ago, actually, I guess, we took on some, I guess you call it like pre-seed funding. So we funded the business ourselves originally, and then when we saw that it had potential, we went out to market, and we got a few $100,000 in kind of seed money from angels and from one institutional investor. And then as we've kind of grown, we've decided to do it again. So we're raising a bigger round at the moment, which should be closing very soon. We hope we'll be closing very soon. And then the plan with that is to grow a bit quicker. Last year we kind of slowed off a bit in our marketing spend, and I think this year is the plan is to, well, no, I know this year the plan is to kind of increase that and make sure that we can grow the various areas that we want to grow. And that includes producing a lot of new content, adding new libraries, but also then our sales and marketing mix, and I guess taking that up a level.
And what was it that made you opt for the funding and the growth route rather than just being a steady sort of lifestyle business?
Yeah, the big thing was the cost of producing good quality content is high, and then the time to sale we found was a lot slower than we'd originally anticipated. So it was more of a, right, if we're going to give this business the best chance, we either have to slow off massively for a few years and kind of not work on the product as much. Because, by the way, the other route, and we did this in our first year, was we did consulting for various companies, and we called that our kind of keep the lights on money, where we were maybe creating online learning for them, or we were giving advice, or whatever it was. So we did some consulting work, but every kind of hour you spend doing that is an hour that you're not working on growing the real value in the business, which is the kind of the core product that you're selling, and then the obviously the sales and marketing that go into that. So yeah, it was a toss up between those two. It's like, do we keep doing this? Do we slow down on our investment and growth of the learning product, or do we go for it? And we felt like we had enough markers in that first year that said, okay, yeah, this is worth doing, this is worth pursuing. And so that's why we did that initial funding round. And I think once you've done a funding round, you're then not necessarily locked into that system, but there is a little bit of pressure to then grow the company and at some point exit the company, so that you give those investors a return. They're not investing in you just like for fun. They're investing in you because at some point they want you to they want to see that money back, times to buy a few, times by 5, times by 10, or whatever. So yeah, that's that. I guess that was our original reasoning for it. And then once you've done it once, sort of, you're then in that kind of mode of growth, I guess, over kind of steady lifestyle business for the short term.
Your growth, will you be growing nationally, domestically, or will you look to expand internationally?
So yeah, we mostly operate in the UK at the moment. We have some European clients, and then we've got a few US partners. To be honest with you, our partner network tends to take care of different parts of the world for us. So we have a few big partners in North America. They kind of sell a lot of our, I guess, into a lot of like North American companies for us. But yeah, for the next year or two, we're focusing UK and Europe predominantly.
And you mentioned about the investing. Obviously, that puts a pressure on you. Once you've taken investment, you can't go back. Do you feel that pressure's good. I'm thinking along the lines of like when I used to be at university and I'd have pressure for a deadline, I'd produce my best work. I'm wondering if it feels like that taking on an investor, the pressure makes you perform better, or
Yeah, I mean, we've been really, really lucky. So all the investors we've had to date have been absolutely wonderful. Can't speak more highly of them. And there's never been any pressure to, you know, to sell, to get a return or anything like that. In fact, they've only been kind of supportive. So yeah, we've in all honesty, we've not really felt it from our investors. And a lot of our early investors were angel investors and people who we knew who were investing in the kind of founders as much as they were investing in the business. So yeah, there's also kind of personal connections there with a lot of them.
were you said that you knew some of the angel investors, but how were you able to find great investors? Because I always hear a lot of horror stories of like people taking on VC money, regretting it. But it seems you've done well with your investors. How did you manage that?
Yeah, well, I say like angels are normally quite different to VCs in terms of their expectations. VCs are running a fund, it's a business, they want to see a return after a certain amount of time, so their kind of principles are slightly different. Their objectives are often slightly different, or just a bit sharper, to be honest with you. But I think we've just been quite careful in any investors that we've taken on and made sure that they kind of like the company, agree with how we're running it, and I think it's about not being in a position to take money because you absolutely have to take money, rather than I think once you get into that position, then yeah, you may get squeezed and you may get a lot more pressure. Versus every time we've raised money, we've been in a position where we don't necessarily need it, but we're doing it to kind of enable growth. So yeah, I think that's important to do as a founder, and I think that comes a lot of that actually is about planning early on your investment, because it can take a really long time. It can take 6 to 8 months from when you put your first pitch deck together to when you actually close your investment round, because there's lots of variables, lots of people you've got to talk to, and lots of work you've got to do to actually make it happen.
And you're also host of a podcast, L&D Challenges podcast, I believe.
Correct.
What made you start the podcast?
Well, we're an audio learning company, so we kind of felt we needed a podcast. We know there's quite a few out there, but yeah, that's the main reason, really. Kind of our thing is audio, and so we wanted to make sure that one of our I guess our marketing routes, or our ways that we communicated with our potential buyers was in that format. But really, I've really enjoyed running it, and it's been a fantastic education for me. So like, quite from a personal point of view, we interview people who we find interesting, who are doing neat things, and whose message we want to amplify and share. And so it's great. Every time I get on a podcast with someone, I'm learning loads of things about learning and development. So it's brilliant. It's been brilliant for my own kind of personal journey as well. So I've been very fortunate to be able to speak to all the different people that I've been able to interview so far.
Yeah, it's a great way to meet people and learn. I can definitely attest to that. And how do you like to learn? I imagine a lot of podcasts and audio learning.
Yeah, only podcasts. Yeah, no. Podcasts and audio, obviously, great. I do listen to a lot of podcasts. I do listen to, our stuff, of course, and then also audiobooks and things. But I guess outside of that, lots of different routes. I mean, I think there's no set, there's no kind of set style that works for certain people. Different things work, I think, based on different situations. And so sometimes I like a kind of a deeper, more immersive learning experience, where maybe you're in a room with a set of experts or with people that you know for a day, and you're troubleshooting and you're working on you're working through a problem and sharing ideas together. That I find that really useful, really kind of as a great way. Equally, I read a lot of books as well, and I find reading just as handy as well. So yeah, it varies depending on what I guess I'm up to and what my diary and time allows for.
Do you have any particularly favorite books or podcasts?
Oh, good question. Yeah, lots of lots of favorite podcasts. I there's a couple of marketing podcasts I've listened to kind of from a business point of view. I also, because I mentioned I did politics earlier, so there's a few kind of political podcasts, Rest is Politics, things like that, that I kind of listen to keep up to date on that. There's a few learning podcasts like, The Learning Hack, Great Minds on Learning by John Halmer, who's a really good podcaster in our space. And then, most recently, actually, I've been listening to a podcast from a friend of mine called Brad, who's called Brad Zomick, and he's created a podcast called LinkedIn Famous, because he helps people get famous on LinkedIn. And so he's had some brilliant interviews on there, so I've really been enjoying that one. From a book point of view, I lean towards books based quite often on like the needs of the business and where we're at the time. So a few years ago, I was reading a lot of books on investment and things like that. How do you do that as a company? I regularly read books on, I guess, sales and marketing. I'm reading a really good book at the moment by Will Thalheimer called the CEO's Guide to Learning and Development. So that's been really good, and I'm getting stuck into that right now.
How do you see the future of learning? So, for example, I've seen it on YouTube a while ago, and it was like you could plug a document in and it would turn into a podcast, and then you could take that document and listen to it in a podcast. And I've seen all these interesting developments. I'm just curious on your thoughts.
Yes, there's some really good tools like Google Notebook, LM, and then more and more text to speech. The speech is getting better, more human, all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I definitely think there's more options now if you do want to listen to something to be able to. If I think about the future of audio and what we're doing as a company, we're pushing into the very human side of things. So we're trying our best to get really, really interesting people, experts, and co-creating content with them. And so you get that human voice, you get the stories that they've lived, you get their lived experience, but you also get their you get their expertise, their depth of knowledge, and you get to hear from them as well. And so I think there is definitely, I can see there being a pushback towards, human when people get overwhelmed with AI created content. I think there's only so much capacity we will have for listening to artificial voices and, people kind of, and things like that. So I definitely feel like there's a space for it. I also feel like there's learning in general. There's going to be a push towards experiential learning. And as people have been working remote, working hybrid, there's more value now placed on that time together. And I feel like that's a great opportunity for learning in companies as well. So when you do pull people together, make them kind of learning and sharing opportunities. And obviously, companies have been running training sessions for years and years in meeting rooms and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like there's going to be an evolution of that and how that works as well against a kind of backdrop of mass created that's been put together by large language models. So yeah, I think that's the way that it'll go as well. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think people's expectations of how they interact with digital content is going to change over the next few years. It changed massively when the internet came in and Google came in. If I need to know something, I can just search for it. Great. And I think with large language models, you can do the same thing, but you can ask it's an evolution of that. You can ask a far more detailed question, get a far more detailed answer. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there are still so many things that people don't know, the things that the unknown unknowns. And I think that's where learning departments are going to have to step in and say, right, so we've got these amazing facilities now that if you know what you need to look for, you can find a very good answer on it very quickly. But what are your kind of skills gaps and what are the things that you don't know? And then how do we create programs of learning that support that are memorable, that spill over into the work that you do, that you can implement and use. And I think that's where kind of learning and learning design is gonna move to.
And last question: do you have a favorite piece of advice, quote or guiding principle or anything similar to this?
I've got quite a few. I guess, I mean, is this with my kind of learning hat on or with my business owner hat on?
Let's do both.
Okay, so I guess with my business hat on is kind of like, in a lot of cases, like 80% is good enough. So, get the kind of things that you're working on done to a level that's great. And it's more important that you do something and something happens, you get something out there, than nothing kind of happens. So I think that, that kind of, that 80% kind of productivity rule is one that I generally live by. And then from a learning point of view, I don't know, actually. Yeah, I think from a learning point of view, my piece of advice or like guiding principle is that there's normally a solution for a problem that you have, but you've just got to find a way of learning the answer. And so I feel like learning is the solution to most problems. And every time I've had a personal or professional kind of thing that I just haven't been able to do or hasn't gone right, I've generally turned to learning to kind of help me fill that gap. And I think that's a good principle to live by for anybody looking to develop their skills and their kind of professional capability.
Yeah, totally agree. Adam, thanks ever so much for coming on. It's been great to hear about yourself, Assemble You, the podcast, and your background. It was an absolute pleasure. So thanks very much.
No worries. Lovely to chat, Alex.
Super. Thanks.